Today, Bitcoin sets yet another record just shy of $85,000. FTX sues Binance and its founder, CZ, for nearly $2 billion. And Bitwise's Matthew Hougan shares how long he thinks the crypto rally could last. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Tanea McKeel. The crypto rally is full steam ahead as we kick off the week, with Bitcoin continuing to hit new highs over the weekend and breaking through the $80,000 level for the first time. As of noon Eastern today, Bitcoin jumped more than 5.5% to the $84,000 range. Its record high now just cents away from $85,000. Ether climbed 2% and at one point broke above $3,300 for the first time since July. Meanwhile, Solana rose 3.33% to $218. Let's also take a look at crypto-focused stocks, which are surging this morning. By just after midday, Coinbase and Riot jumped more than 19% to kick off the week. Riot actually lags the performance of some other miners like Marathon and CleanSpark, which have soared more than 20% today. Okay, let's talk about the top stories. MicroStrategy says it's acquired more than 27,000 Bitcoins since the end of October. The exact total was 27,200 Bitcoin purchased with cash for slightly more than $2 billion. That averages out to around $74,500 per Bitcoin. MicroStrategy's executive chairman, Michael Saylor, said yesterday that the firm holds around 279,420 Bitcoins, or around $11.9 billion. He also said the average purchase price of those holdings is around $42,692. Shares of MicroStrategy stock popped 18% by 12:30 Eastern, adding to its post-election gains. Next, the FTX estate is suing Binance and its co-founder, Changpeng Zhao, for $1.8 billion. A filing in a Delaware court Sunday claims FTX CEO Sam Bankman-Fried negotiated to buy Binance and CZ's stake of his company in 2021. The FTX estate argues the deal was a constructive fraudulent transfer, as it was funded by an insolvent Alameda Research, FTX's now defunct sister hedge fund. The filing claims the deal was made with a combination of FTX's own FTT token and the Binance-issued BNB and BUSD tokens. Binance told CNBC the claims are meritless and that it would defend itself. Also last week, Alameda Research filed an action to recover more than $11 million it says is held in a Crypto.com exchange controlled by Alameda. All right, let's pivot back to markets for our main story. With Bitcoin hitting fresh all-time highs, I spoke with Matt Hougan, CIO of Bitwise Asset Management, for his reaction and his outlook for the cryptocurrency by year end. Let me first get your reaction to this rally that we've seen over the past week, and specifically, not to be a party pooper, but it really does feel very bullish and like it's straight to the moon from here. And at what point do you start to caution investors, and how long do you expect this to last, given that we are in quite a lengthy honeymoon period here?
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to be here. I'm not sure it's straight to the moon, but it does seem like there's an air gap between the previous all-time highs around 72,000 and $100,000. It's hard exactly to see what would force sellers to come into this market and halt the momentum before we get to that level. Of course, there are no guarantees. You could see pullbacks, but we're in a new crypto market cycle. We're in a golden age of crypto. I do think that we are right to be bullish, and the bias is still on the upside.
Can you get a little bit into the nuance of this election as a driver? I mean, there's the idiosyncratic parts, the promise of a more supportive regulatory environment, but there are also a lot of implications that we can take from Donald Trump's policy plans and some of the statements he's made. That would have macro effects. I think that would be positive for Bitcoin. So talk about each side of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start just on the crypto side, which is that we can expect to see a sea change in the regulatory environment towards crypto. It's absolutely the case that crypto has spent the past 4 years fighting with one hand tied behind its back, fighting on an uneven playing field, facing significant, regulatory prosecution, a lot of regulatory unclarity. And that's just shifted, 180 degrees. We're now in a positive regulatory environment. We now have tailwinds from that. And that comes in the case of a market that was already in a bull market. So I do think there's been a 180 flip from a regulatory perspective, and I think that's going to push us higher. I think what you're hinting at is that other piece of the puzzle, which is that the economic policies that we expect the Trump administration to pursue should be a positive environment for stores of value in general, should be positive for gold, should be positive for crypto. I do like when people think about investing in Bitcoin to remember that you're making two different bets. The first bet is you're making is that Bitcoin will go from this new idea to a mainstream asset. If it succeeds in doing that, it can go to $1 million, right? We won't match gold until Bitcoin gets to $1 million. The second bet that you're making is that the size of that market will grow because the US is piling on debt, degrading its currency, etc. And when both of those things happen at once, you get the kind of move that we're seeing in Bitcoin right now. It's fun to watch.
And just to drive a little further on that, I mean, some experts have said that some of Trump's policies could have a chilling effect on the economy. Not to frame it so black and white, but do you see that as necessarily a headwind for crypto?
Yeah, I think the references there are towards like the potential for tariffs to increase inflation, etc. All of that actually plays into the crypto window. And I think it's overwhelmed by this shift in the regulatory environment. Look, this is a very positive market for crypto on both sides of the spectrum. It's important to note that the recent market move, I think, has been driven in part not by net new demand, but by sellers evaporating from this market. If you think of long-term investors in Bitcoin who are willing to sell at previous all-time highs, they're no longer willing to sell until Bitcoin gets to $100,000. If you think of people who were shorting Bitcoin, they're no longer willing to short Bitcoin because we could wake up one day and have a US strategic Bitcoin reserve, and they don't want to be on the other side of that trade. And then you have this long-term demand. So is the economic outlook for the US mixed? Certainly. Was the economy decelerating already? We've seen that in the negative revisions on job claims and other aspects. Does that matter to Bitcoin? I'm not sure. I think all signs point towards more concerns about inflation, more concerns about the degradation of the dollar, and more institutional adoption of Bitcoin and crypto. I think it's a win-win scenario for this market.
Okay, I rarely ask you this specific question, but do you have a price target for Bitcoin for the end of the year? 80K and higher towards 6 digits is what many in the space have been saying. And if it keeps going this way, it seems like that could easily happen. Do you have a number in mind for this year?
I wish I could be more unique. Yeah. At the start of this year, Bitwise predicted that Bitcoin would exceed $80,000 and set new all-time highs. So we've gotten that one right. I think we have a very clear path right up to 100K. I do think 100K is something that we could hit our heads against. It's a behavioral sell wall. I think there's some long-term investors who will look to take profits at that level. But I think that will be a pause and not a stop. So 100K by the end of this year. I think 200K is completely reasonable in 2025 and could be substantially higher depending on how things pan out. Of course, there's a lot of risk. There will be a lot of volatility. There will be pullbacks, but the trend is up and to the right. And I think that's going to stay intact for a little while.
All right, let's flip over to ETH. So over $3,000 now as of this weekend. And we have an interesting story here because it really was kind of not doing anything. Investors, in large part, had sort of abandoned it from August to last week. People were saying that they didn't see the investment case for ETH anymore. It wasn't behaving like ultrasound money. The narrative was a little bit hard for institutions to wrap their heads around. The ETH ETFs were not doing well, which was expected, but you just did not see them catch up to the Bitcoin ETFs at any point. And now we've got this incredible rally after the election. So what do you make of it? And what specifically is driving that rally? Because it seems like it's different from Bitcoin hit all-time highs. So now ETH is hitting all-time highs. So now everything else is going to rally. It feels like there is something specific to, what we're looking at in a second Trump term that's driving ETH higher.
Yeah, I think there is a specific narrative around ETH. If you think about what this regulatory sea change will unleash in terms of crypto, it will unleash stablecoins. We expect a stablecoin bill, and I suspect that market will go from $150 billion to $1 trillion plus in the next year or 2 years. I think you're going to see a resurgence of DeFi, which has been in a giant regulatory shadow and will be brought into the regulatory light. I think you'll see a shotgun start of major Wall Street firms who want to make sure they have a foot in the door in crypto. And we've seen that those firms tend to build on ETH. All three of these things are fairly ETH specific, right? ETH is the dominant chain for issuing stablecoins. It's a dominant market for DeFi. It has been the favored blockchain, public blockchain for large Wall Street firms to build on it. I'm not saying that Solana et al. Don't do well as well from this regulatory shift, but I do think there's specific catalysts for ETH coming out of this regulatory change that help explain why it's rallying and why I think, again, the outlook there is good as well.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today. We'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.